You will not believe it. There are thousands of people going to a football match and they idolise these players. And I was like, really, Dad? He said, you have to be in America. This is where you have to be. And that was in 1999. I've been on a journey for such a long time that when you stumble across a dream job, I think it's really difficult to think about anything else.
My guest today is one of the most successful managers in world football. A pioneer who's climbed the coaching ladder rung by rung, paid her dues and then some, and has, over the past decade, transformed Chelsea women from also ran to back-to-back powerhouse winners of the Women's Super League, to an inspirational pathfinding journey which transcends sports. It's an incredible joy to welcome manager of Chelsea FC Women and newly minted FIFA Best Women's Coach of the Year, Emma Hayes.
Hello, America. Wow, what a welcome that was.
I want to go right back to the beginning, Emma. You grew up in Camden, North London in the 1980s. Your idols when you were young were Maradona and the iconic Paul Gascoigne. What did you dream of as a kid?
Playing football in cages, playing in games where there were no pennies. It was 20 aside. I think have always been my fondest memories. I used to grow up dreaming of playing in the FA Cup final. That's what a kid in the 80s really wanted to do. And I wanted to lead my team out at Wembley. And I used to line all the kids up beside the pitch, including my sisters. And we used to enter the pitch one by one, waving to the fake Wembley crowd and talking about playing at Wembley and winning in front of 90,000 people. And every time the winning team celebrated and lifted the cup. So for me, being involved with the biggest tournaments on the biggest stage, I've dreamt about it since I was a kid.
We've all done it. Not everybody has made those dreams come true. And I do think it's important here for an American audience to describe briefly the state of women's football in England in the 1980s.
There was zero opportunities. There was zero role models. Didn't know what a female football player looked like until 1999. That generation, they were the first role models for me.
The 1999 Women's World Cup held right here in America. What was it like when you saw that for the very first time?
My father went to Atlanta and he went to the games. I never forget, he called me, not from a mobile phone because I think they were only 2 years old, but he called me from his hotel and he said, Emma, you will not believe it. There are thousands of people going to a football match and they idolise these players. And I was like, really, Dad? He said, you have to be in America. This is where you have to be. And that was in 1999.
You were a promising youth player. You played on the Arsenal under-18 till a skiing injury at age 17 cruelly put an end to your playing career. After a couple of years in an unsatisfying everyday job, you felt that calling to be back in football and you headed to the United States of America. You said you arrived with just £1,000 and a backpack. You took a job in Long Island for $120 a week. Young Emma Hayes arriving in an American sports culture that embraced women's football. What was that like?
I remember getting at the airport, being given a set of keys, a car, again, no GPS, no mobile phones, good old traditional map. And I remember navigating the Long Island Expressway, the Grand Central Parkway, and thinking, oh my goodness, I barely know how to drive on the right side of the road. I've got to get used to everything here. The culture shock for me was I just couldn't believe how much football was being played everywhere on fields and these little youth clubs with hundreds, thousands of kids. And more importantly, an even split between boys and girls. It was so shocking for me. Actually, I was coaching boys teams as well, which I really loved. And I remember within 12 months, I got an opportunity to work for the Long Island Lady Riders and they'd sacked their coach. And this little 25-year-old was sort of in a position that went, I'll do it.
2001, you only became the youngest head coach in the history of the W League, that long-suffering semi-pro women's league at the Long Island Lady Riders. Now, half the players on the team were older than you at the time, Emma. You were so bloody green as a manager. Just how steep was that learning curve?
I had a lot to learn. I made so many mistakes. When it comes to tough decisions, I was relatively new to that. I didn't really know how to handle that. And sometimes I'm sure I handled some of them terribly. But what I learned was that you're either going to put the best interest of the whole first, or you play favourites, or you play to not do anything to upset or offend anyone. And I realised very early on I was born to be a head coach.
You only went and won the conference championships and were named National Coach of the Year. You headed back to England to be an assistant coach to the legendary Vic Akers at Arsenal Ladies. You were there in 2007 when Arsenal completed an unprecedented quadruple. And Arsenal tapped you to take over for Akers when he retired after 22 years and 36 trophies. But I'm fascinated by this, Emma. You rejected the chance because, quote, we'd won everything and I didn't feel challenged.
When I came back to the UK, I thought, wow, this is amazing. This is a dream for me. The club I grew up playing at, I now get the chance to go and be an academy director and assistant coach and compete for titles. And more importantly, compete to win the Champions League. To do that within my first year was still one of my big highs in my career. But what I realised that trouncing teams 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-0, it just didn't stimulate me. It wasn't enough. At that young age, I felt like I needed to be pushed again, and taking the hard decision to go back to the US for me was the right decision. And I had to choose between St. Louis at the time and Chicago, and I chose Chicago because I'm more of a city girl.
2008, you charged back to the United States, accepting the challenge of managing the Chicago Red Stars, then a new team in the freshly formed WPS. You selected one Megan Rapinoe of the University of Portland as your first draft pick in 2009, but it was not to be though. The owners were impatient. You were sacked just 6 games into the 2010 season, your first real career failure. And you've talked about how shattering this moment was for you. You said, I cried for a couple of weeks, partied for a couple of weeks, lost my confidence completely. But you've also said that you train yourself to be really self-reflective in loss.
I learned building a franchise from scratch is one of the hardest things to do, because it's not as simple as just putting a team together. You're putting offices together, you're finding training pitches, you are trying to navigate your way through a landscape that isn't established yet. I learned that you don't get time. You don't have that time. You don't get the opportunity and the foundation to build something. You have to win now. And that was a really big lesson, having come from Arsenal, an established club, to one that was, you know, you're putting a whole group of 18, 19 players together and you expect it to work. And it didn't work for whatever reason. It was another reminder that this isn't fantasy football. So when you put together a list of names, and everyone used to say to me, oh my God, the Chicago Red Stars is the best team on paper. Correct, they were on paper. It didn't work as a team for a number of reasons, and it just didn't produce the performances. And I reflected so hard on how to build a team.
You went back to England and took a hiatus from management, building up your family's foreign exchange business. Were there any doubts during this time? Like maybe management not for me, maybe I should be doing something easier, something with more job security? Or in your mind, was it always just a matter of biding your time for that next move?
This is about 2010, 2011. I'd had 10 years non-stop. I just needed a break. I just needed to, as I always say, I just needed to get off the train. I needed to experience what it felt like to have a weekend. Like, as we know, us football people, we never have weekends. Like, I had Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday for 2 whole years. Christmases every weekend. But I realised within a year and a half of that it wasn't enough. I didn't really want my weekend that much. I missed football. I get this phone call from the then Chelsea chairman, says, hi Emma, I've been given your name. Are you interested in becoming the Chelsea manager? And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, it's happening. It's happening.
When in 2012, Chelsea did come calling, you've said you never accepted a job so quickly. Your quote is, I didn't even ask about the money. I just thought, this is my calling.
I think I accepted the job before they put the phone down. I hadn't even visited the facility. I didn't know what his budget was. I knew a little bit about their playing squad. The following morning, I got on a train. I came straight out to Cobham. I got here a little early. I walked across the site and I thought, the potential here is enormous. This is enormous. And all I saw was potential.
The state of the team when you inherited it was very different than the Chelsea women powerhouse we now know. Had a small budget, tiny staff, all part-time, training, I think just twice a week. Team even had to wash their own kit.
We had players that were on part-time contracts and a group of players that were no better than probably the bottom two teams in the league. I'd come from a culture of America where I'd been in draft systems, I'd been in the collegiate system, I'd been in the pro system. So for me, I only thought about how to build a team without really understanding that in England, dismantling a team to rebuild just didn't happen because women's football was part of the amateur age. So when I came to Chelsea, I think I cut 8 or 9 bodies immediately. I just was so Americanized and I thought about what we had to do and I had to free up some funds to try and build the process. I then fast realised that we didn't have the infrastructure off the pitch and we needed to put the foundation into hiring a general manager and the support staff in and around the team.
Rocky start, you lost 11 of your first 12 games, and on the men's side, that's often enough grounds for sacking. You did somehow convince Chelsea to invest not just in you, but in the team itself, the entire infrastructure. How did you do that?
Good relationships, good patience, loads of suffering, because I knew the team wasn't good enough. I always like to build the narrative. I knew that recruiting 1 or 2 players, the world would start looking and go, hang on, I think Chelsea are investing. And then just built layer on layer, year on year, to keep influencing that narrative in the direction we wanted it to go. But the key was off the pitch. You have to get it right off the pitch with everything around it. On it, 15 months of losing non-stop. I remember one of my assistants saying to me, Emma, we're terrible. I said, I know, but stick with the task. It's a process. We have to get that process right off, keep the recruitment going. The vision was clear. And I think all those experiences prior to that had put me in the position where I felt calm about it. And I just knew it was a matter of time.
2014 season, the title agonisingly slipped through your fingers on the final day. That winter, the club funded a move to full-time training, and the impact has been, well, seismic. Chelsea have become a juggernaut. 2015, 2018, 2020, 2021 champions. And I want to talk about your leadership style, because you've been described as a shapeshifter in terms of your management approach. You can be a parent figure, but you can also deliver tough love. You give some players a lot of tactical information. Others, like our friend Sam Kerr, you've said do better with less. What's the secret of great player management?
Oh, $1 million question. And if we could coin it and bottle it and sell it, I'd be a millionaire. The realities are it usually comes off of having the right information in the first instance. So you need really, really good staff. You need really, really good timing, knowing the right time when to do something. You need really good tone. I always say this to people. So many people who walk into difficulty do it because they have poor tone and poor timing. I think, importantly, honesty. Even if someone doesn't like it, you have to be able to deliver an honest assessment of something, but usually back it up with something factual, evidence-based. And in the case of players, that might be analysis, that might be stats. Those for me are the key components, but I don't think there is just one single ingredient.
I mean, one of the details you've dug into, which I'm fascinated by, is tailoring players' fitness and nutritional programs, tying them to their menstrual cycles, being extra careful about ACL tears, which women are 3 times more prone to than gents. When the women's game was just starting to gain momentum, there was a big push to show that there was no difference between men's and women's football, that if you give them the same training, same facilities, it will amount to the same game. But it seems like over the past couple of years, there's been more of an acknowledgement and catering to the ways that female footballers and women's football is different than men's. How do you balance those two impulses?
Well, I think the starting point has to be remembering that women are not small men. That is so absolutely critical. So let's take any injury, like the biggest one, an ACL. Rehabbing an ACL injury for men and women, they might have a lot of similarities, but we don't develop as much muscle as men because we don't produce as much testosterone. Just take that as something simple. You then add on to the fact that we have a menstrual cycle, and within that menstrual cycle, for some, might not be disturbing of anything they're doing throughout the month, and for others it could be damaging at different points. So we got hormonal, physiological differences. Then take the brain. Our brains are wired completely different.
Thank God.
Hallelujah. That's what makes the world what it is. We want it to be like that. But if our starting point is to treat women in exactly the same way, then our outcome will be completely different. And I think that's what's gone wrong for a long time, and something that we've had to re-educate internally, that starting point is different. And from there, develop our own research, our own methodologies around that.
There's a consistent conversation that now surrounds you about whether you could become the first woman to manage a Premier League side. You're constantly linked to the Chelsea and the Spurs jobs, by Paper Talk in particular. Can you ever see yourself managing in the Premier League?
What I know is that I've been on a journey for such a long time that when you stumble across a dream job, I think it's really difficult to think about anything else. Chelsea for me is my heart, my home. I'm in London, I'm a Londoner. This has been all I've ever thought about. And the reason I say that is not to avoid your question, is that what I have learned about my brain is that the minute you start to think about being somewhere else is the minute you're dead in this business. So I don't preoccupy my mind with thinking about anything else than being a champion here.
How long will it take then before you believe we'll see a women's coach in the Premier League?
I think the good news is that more clubs are hiring women to coach within their academies and be part of their staff. I think that the knock-on effect for that will be women, I think, that are already in those existing situations might be promoted and progress from within clubs. I could see that happening within the next 5 years, of females being promoted onto coaching staff.
Oh, from your mouth to God's ear. Emma, you've said that you don't feel the pressure of goals as manager, that your life goals indeed have nothing to do with football. But I would love to hear how you see the future of women's football in England and globally over the next 5-10 years.
First of all, pressure is when people have to find money to pay for their mortgage, or finding food to feed their families, or fighting to stave off any health concerns. For me, that's pressure. This is privilege. Secondly, when it comes to the women's game, it's going to keep progressing. It's going to have a huge Euros tournament this summer, which I think is going to elevate the game to another space. And broadcasting will be in demand with more and more platforms, maybe alternative platforms looking to secure more opportunities to sell the women's game. And I think with prize money, another big World Cup, I think women's football is on the cusp of exploding and finally catching up from 50 years of neglect that will put us in our rightful place as a well-established professional sport.
And there is Sam Kerr in the right place at the right time to secure her hat-trick and the celebration to match.
She just received the FIFA award for Best Coach, an individual award. And first of all, I loved your open mouth reaction. And you did make it clear, football is a team game, but there was a side to you that was deeply emotional. And you said something beautiful, Emma. You said the first thing I thought about was that little kid in the orange flats kicking the ball against the wall, commentating on myself in a cup final, leading a team. As a little girl, I dreamed of these things. I've just had a dream turn into a reality.
Yeah.
Take us into your head in that moment.
Take you into my head while I was sitting there wearing my mum's slippers and pyjamas underneath a nice top. This was a moment where I thought I was joining a call to eventually watch somebody else pick the trophy up. I left the call, sat in a kitchen, speechless, thinking, who do I phone first? And what is it I'm going to say? Because it felt to me, and honestly, I'll say this, only a woman will say what I'm going to say. It felt like we'd played a cup final and we hadn't played very well. And I felt guilty about getting it. And then I stopped and I thought, in years to come, they're not going to care whether you played very well, you won it. So I'm going to think about all the cups of tea I'm going to ask people to make me at work this week, because I have just been voted the best coach in the world. Oh my goodness, I've just won an Oscar. I can't believe it. I feel embarrassed about it, even though it's something I've worked so hard to achieve. I am proud of myself. Like, I know how hard I've worked, but I also know that all the beautiful people around me are the reason why I'm in the position I'm in.
Emma Hayes, to more Oscars, to more awards, to more cups of teas, to more wearing your mother's slippers. It's a glamorous life, football. And
Definitely.
You are an inspiration, a pathfinder, a human wonder to you, your team, your joy, and your continued success.
Thank you very much.